Hi, I'm Rach from Mellow Yarns, and in today's video I'm going to do a tutorial for how to make this $600 Miu Miu scrunchie yourself at home using old scraps of yarn that you might have lying around. Okay, so the equipment that you're going to need to make the scrunchie, you're going to need some elastic. You can get this kind of thing at places like Spotlight. You just want to get an elastic that's fairly narrow. You'll need some sewing thread and a sewing needle. This is just to sew up our elastic. If you don't have these, you can just use a knot, but sewing it up is a little bit more secure. And then you just need some yarn. So this is a great project for using up little bits of yarn that you might have left over from projects, because really you can use any weight of yarn and any different combination of colours. So I have this basket here just filled with scraps of yarn from the Kmart kit tutorials that I do. So this is going to be the perfect yarn for me to use for the scrunchie. But really you can use any kind of yarn, so any type of fibre, any type of yarn weight. And then you just want to use a crochet hook that's going to match the size of your yarn. I'm going to use a 4.5mm hook for mine. This Kmart kit yarn tends to come with a 2.5mm hook, but I'm using a larger hook for two reasons. One, that I'm going to be double stranding the yarn, so I'm going to be holding two bits of yarn together, which will double its weight or thickness. And also, when you're making amigurumi or crochet toys, generally you want to use a smaller crochet hook so that you have really tight stitches, whereas for something like a scrunchie, you don't necessarily want to be sizing down your hook too much. Might be a bit of trial and error to find the right crochet hook size. If you're struggling to catch the yarn on the head of your crochet hook, then your hook might be a little too small. If your fabric's looking really loose, then you might want to go for a smaller hook. Okay, so the first step is to measure out how big you want your elastic to be. I suggest using a scrunchie or a hair tie that you have at the moment that you know is kind of a good length for your hair, and just measure out what the circumference is of that scrunchie when it is not stretched. I like to wrap my scrunchies around twice, so I'm going to do mine at 19 centimeters, and then you just want to add 2 centimeters extra onto the ideal length that you come up with, so I'm going to do 21. Then you just want to stretch your elastic as far as it goes and measure how long that is. So at full stretch mine is 30 centimeters, and this is essentially the size of the fabric that we're going to make. So here's my lovely mess of scrap yarn. So you just want to take one of the colours that you're wanting to use, and you're going to make a chain that is as long as the stretched size of your elastic. So in my case that's 30 centimeters. If you're new to crochet, I've included some beginner tutorials in the link below, including how to do a slip knot, how to do a chain, how to hold your hook in yarn. So be sure to check out those tutorials if you are new to crochet. So basically we just want to create a chain until we get to the right length. So once you've got to the right length, we're now going to work back into the starting chain. So we're going to work into the back bumps of the chain. So on the top of your chain you'll see these kind of V's, and if you turn your chain over you'll see these little ridges or bumps along the back, and it's these back bumps that we're going to work into. You want to skip the first two chains, so we'll skip this one, and we're going to move into the third one. We're going to work into the back bump, and we're going to do a double crochet. So we need to yarn over before we insert our hook. Then we'll insert it into that third back bump, like so, and then do a double crochet. So yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through the first two, yarn over, pull through the next two. If you're new to crochet, I suggest using a stitch marker to mark this as your first stitch of the round, because it can be easy to lose track of the start and the end of your row, which can lead to you dropping or accidentally adding stitches. And then we're just going to keep doing double crochets all the way down, each time working under the back bump, like so. Now, but because this is a scrappy yarn scrunchie, we want to kind of randomly alternate our yarn colours. So at some point down this initial chain, you're going to want to switch to your next yarn colour. Totally up to you when you do that, and it's good to kind of just do it a little bit randomly so it has a bit of an organic feel. Should say as well that if you don't really like the scrappy yarn look, you can of course just make the scrunchie using one type of yarn. Okay, so I've done about 15 stitches. Now I'm going to switch colour, and I'm also going to start double stranding my yarn. So you'll see in the Miu Miu scrunchie that in some places they actually hold 2 strands of yarn in different colours together, and other parts they just have the single strand. So I'm going to combine this orange yarn with this yellow, and basically I'm just going to hold these 2 yarns together and treat them as though they were one strand of yarn. So to change colour, you're going to do is start your stitch as normal, so we'll yarn over, go into that back bump, yarn over, pull up a loop, have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over and pull through the first 2 loops, but we'll stop at this point. So instead of doing the final part of the double crochet stitch, we'll stop at this point. Then you just want to drape your new yarn, whether that's 1 strand or 2, over your crochet hook, and then you're just going to pull it through the 2 loops that are on your hook. Now we can use this yarn as our working yarn and just continue making stitches. So we'll still be working into the back bumps, and I'm just basically holding both the yellow and the orange yarn together and treating them just like 1 strand of yarn. Just being careful not to accidentally split them. Now I'm going to change colour just at the end of my row, so I've just done the first half of my last double crochet, but I haven't quite finished that stitch. I'm now going to trim this yarn here. I'm going to grab my next set of yarn. I'm going to hold light blue and white together, and then again I'm just going to drape that over and pull it through to complete that final stitch. Then to start the next round I'm going to chain 3. Up to you, but I suggest ignoring this chain and not counting it as a stitch, so doing your first double crochet of the next round into the very first stitch. And then again, if you want to make sure you don't lose track of your stitches, pop a stitch marker into the stitch and then just continue doing double crochets all the way across. So again, you just want to continue on this way, changing yarn colour at random intervals. The Miu Miu one seems to always change colour at the end of a row, and then sometimes as well partway through rows, but of course just do whatever feels right to you. And you just want to do this for 10 rows in total, and then I'll show you how we sew it up. And then once you've done 10 rows we can fasten off. So you just want to cut a yarn tail, and I suggest cutting a decent sized yarn tail because we can use this yarn tail to sew up the short edge of our scrunchie. And then yarn over and pull that yarn all the way through to create a knot. The next step is to weave in all of these ends. Weaving in your ends is just a way to ensure that your work doesn't come unraveled. So you just want to thread each piece of yarn onto a tapestry needle and then weave in and through a few different stitches in the matching colour. And you want to ideally work in at least 3 different directions to make sure it's not going to come undone. Normally with weaving in your ends you would then trim tails, but because this is going to be inside our scrunchie we don't necessarily need to. So you just want to sew up all of your ends except for your very last yarn tail, which we can use to sew up. And you also just want to weave in all your ends on the same side. So for your tails that are on the opposite side, you just want to thread them through to the other side so that you've got one side without any tails poking through. Okay, now you don't actually need to trim these tails because they will be inside the scrunchie, but I'm just a bit worried about how much extra bulk these are going to add because I have very fine hair. So I'm going to trim off all my tails, but I'm not going to worry too much about neatness because this is going to be inside the scrunchie anyway. Okay, now we just need to assemble our scrunchie. So we're going to join the two short ends together first. So you want the wrong side facing out, so the side that's got your yarn tails on it. And then you just want to line up your two short sides, and then you can either use your tail if your tail is long enough, or otherwise you can just grab another piece of yarn to do this. You want to thread that onto your tapestry needle. I'm actually just going to use one colour, and then we're just going to sew it up. So you can sew it up in any kind of whatever way you prefer to sew up your work, but a simple way is just to do zigzag stitches. I believe this is called the whip stitch, so where you go up through the top piece, down through the bottom, and repeat. Then we just want to secure this in a knot. I find the easiest way to do this is to go under a stitch and pull through a loop. Sorry, my yarn's a bit short, so it's a bit tricky to see, but just leave a loop, and then you just want to thread the tail through that loop to create a knot. Then we want to attach elastic. Now, a couple of different options here. If you don't have any of this elastic, you can actually just put a hairband or a hair tie that you already have and just insert it over the top of your work like so. If you've got some of this elastic but you don't have a sewing thread and needle, you can just tie this around and knot it. Although I find a knot is not the most secure, so I'm actually going to sew mine up. So to do that, I'm just going to wrap it around my work, and again I've got the wrong side, the side that's got kind of the scrappy yarn ends facing out. I've just got some white sewing thread and a sewing needle. I'm just going to cut a length of thread. I like to use my thread double-stranded, so I will fold my yarn in half and thread that onto my sewing needle. So at one end you've got a loop, and at the other end you've got your two tails. And then to create a knot at the start of my work, I'm just going to come up through where the elastic is doubled up, through both pieces of elastic. And I'm going to pull through, but not all the way through. I'm going to wait till I've got a little loop here, and then I'm just going to put my needle into that loop and pull that tight, and that creates a nice knot at the start of your work. And then I'm just going to work around in a rectangle in the section where the elastic is doubled up. So go all the way down one side. And then once I get to the end here, I'm going to go down the other side. And then once I get to the end, I'm going to do the same thing with the loop to create a knot. And just to be extra secure, I'm also going to knot the two strands together a couple of times. Just trim off some of the excess thread. Okay, now our final step is to seam the two long edges of our scrunchie. And we're going to do that using slip stitches. You can sew it up if you'd prefer to do that, but I think the slip stitch seam would actually look quite cool with this kind of scrappy look, and it is much quicker and easier than sewing up. So to do the slip stitch technique, you just want to take your crochet hook and some yarn, and then we're essentially going to crochet the two edges together. So make sure you've got the right side facing out. You just want to insert your hook under a stitch on the side closest to you, and then go under the stitch on the corresponding stitch on the opposite side of the fabric. You want to take your yarn and just drape it over your crochet hook and bring it to the front of your work. And then we're essentially going to do slip stitches all the way down. So just go under the next stitch as well as under the matching stitch on the other side. Yarn over, pull that yarn through both of those stitches. You'll have 2 loops on your hook, and then pull that loop through the loop that's on your hook. And you just want to do this all the way around your scrunchie. And then when you get all the way around, you just want to fasten off. Then you just need to weave in these final yarn tails. And to hide these yarn tails as well, you can actually just insert your needle into somewhere in the scrunchie, and then pop out somewhere else. And then just trim off the excess. And just like that, your scrunchie is done and you've saved yourself $600. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and if you're also wanting to incorporate more handmade and slow fashion into your wardrobe, be sure to check out madeit.com.au. Made It is a great website that's kind of like an Australian Etsy. One difference between Made It and Etsy is that Made It vets all of its sellers or artisans on the platform, so you can be really confident that everything that you buy from there is genuinely handmade. Made It is currently only available for those of you based in Australia, but it will be opening up international shipping very soon. I sell some of my products on madeit.com.au. You can get my Learn How to Crochet kit on there, which is an excellent Christmas present, and I've also designed a crochet advent calendar for Christmas. In the 12 days of the advent, you'll get a different piece of the pattern, and by the end of the 12 days you will have 4 beautiful Christmas ornaments that you made with your very own hands. The kit includes yarn, crochet hook, and every day you'll open a new envelope which will reveal part of the pattern. But as well as my stuff, there are some really great finds on Made It, so I encourage you to check it out. A great place to shop for Christmas presents. Thanks for crocheting with me today, and happy crafting!